about that? Phenylalanine is an amino acid. I don't even know what this shit is. Oh, it's found natural. I thought it was. Oh, I thought it was. What's the stuff that's in Diet Coke?
Oh, the stuff. I know what you're talking about.
The aspartame warning. It says like phenylketonuria or something like that.
Yeah. Ketone. Yeah.
Aspartame warning.
How do I say it?
Oh, phenylalanine. Should we get that out of there? What the fuck am I even looking at right now? Contains a source of phenylalanine. What does that mean? Is that bad? Oh no. Phenylketonuria.
Yeah, that's the warning that.
I mean, that sounds like the same word. Probably look into what it is.
Hey, Kara Fro, how you doing?
It's a shame that Diet Coke is as good as it is.
I know.
Yeah, I'm live.
Oh,
that's why we made Zip.
Yeah, that's why we made Zip. So it has L-phenylalanine, which if that's dangerous, we'll get it out of there. I don't know what the fuck that is. L-theanine, L-alpha-glycerol, phosphorylcholine.
I gotta start editing this thing.
B3, L-arginine.
This week's episode of Culture Skate.
Caffeine, EDTA. What's that? Sounds cancerous. Is this drink gonna give people cancer? What is this? Ethyl diaminotetracetic acid? What the hell? Unsafe? For 3 grams? We have 50 grams? Zip has... No, I'm just kidding. It does not have 50 grams. Sucralose, is that good or bad?
Sucralose is like stevia?
Synthetic. Well, I guess you're drinking sucralose now. Yeah, artificial sweetener. Ugh. Yeah, you're not going to want to drink this Zip stuff. It's pretty bad for you. How much Splendid does the average drink have?
Looks like I don't need to fix the... Looks like the audio is on point.
The hell are we feeding people here? Erythritol, what's that?
Oh, that's
Sounds like poison. Sugar alcohol. Carrageenan? What's carrageenan? Sodium benzoate. This is like pure cancer that we're feeding people here. Preservative. Oh. Citric acid. Potassium sorbate. Okay, so it's poison. But it's really good.
Yeah.
It's really, really good. You're gonna love it. Listen, it's green cherry menthol. Don't think about it too much. Okay?
It's
fine.
Little read labels.
Yeah. Well,
I know a good salesman for this.
Yeah.
You want regular drinks? No, you want the what's this called?
Zip.
You want the Zip Wow. The ShamWow version.
Bro.
We got the Zip, you got the Zip Wow. It's version 2.
Yeah, man.
Ferrero Rocher. Celebrate the moment.
Hello and welcome to Movie World Plus. I'm in my car. I set up a tripod so it's safe because I just got out of Madam Web, Sony's latest Spider-Man movie. And what a waste of a movie that was. Look, I'll say this. The actors tried their best. Dakota Johnson, I'm not mad at her. Sydney Sweeney, all of them, I'm not mad at them. Adam Scott was in this movie. It was just frustratingly unnecessary. So stupid. So stupid. And I didn't need another character who could tell the future. I'm so sick of these types of characters. There's too many Doctor Strange and Eternals and people who can change the past and know everything that's going on. It's just too much power. what I'm excited to see again. And they clearly knew that, so not only did they give us a character who can tell the future, but then they introduced these 3 Spider Women that you've seen in the trailers, and none of them get to be Spider Women in the movie. Spoiler alert, I guess. But all those little teaser shots you see in the trailer, that's it. There's no like big moment where you're gonna get them all. No, so if you're going in hoping for that, park it at the door. This is all origin story. It's too much origin story. All about Dakota Johnson. What's her name? Cassie Webb. It's so dumb of a name. Cassie Webb learning the truth about her mother and her hunt of spiders. And just the whole damn thing is silly. It's just not enough fun silly. I will say, there are parts that were better to me than, say, even like Morbius, which was so dumb. But man, it's hard to judge which one's worse. This one's worse for its own stupid reasons, but so was Morbius. Morbius so unnecessary. These movies that Sony keeps doing, exploiting their Marvel villains from the Spider-Man universe, are doing such a disservice to the amazing Spider-Man movies.
Yes, Andy's on my TV.
But I would argue even what Morton Miller are doing over there with the animated universe is so much better than whatever the hell this is. And it's so irritating that Sony and everybody at Sony has control of this franchise and keeps running into the ground. Marvel at all, this movie, again, like, it's not, the script is so dumb. The script is so dumb. But the movie itself isn't the dumpster fire I thought it would be, like incoherent babble-bop, but it's just a lot of unnecessary setup and origining. But the characters are, like, the actors are likable actors. Like, I don't dislike any of these actors. They're just really given nothing to do. The entire setup of this movie, of Dakota Johnson somehow waking up to realize she can see premonitions of the future, it's never explained how or why that works. And then just conveniently, she runs into these 3 girls because she's already run into them before, so why not? And the bad guy sees these girls as Spider-Man trying to kill him, so he must find them before they do it. So then, of course, Dakota Johnson has to stumble upon them first. And the whole premise of this scene, in the subway scene, where she stumbles upon the 3 girls who are all just beautiful runaway teenagers that she then gathers, and they all just sort of buy it, and they're all like following her lead for no reason. The whole thing is so stupid. Like, everybody involved in this movie is trying. They're like, well, let's all get paid. Let's try to do the best we can because of this dumb material. But the whole premise of Madam Web, these characters, this whole thing, it's just dumb. It's just so dumb. There are several points in this movie where I just laughed at just sort of the stupidness of the script, of the premise. But again, Dakota Johnson's trying her damnedest to like have some fun and some
What the
fun.
fuck?
She's committed. She's
When has this ever been an
a
option?
bunch of important scenes when no one else is in the room and talking to herself in a as believable of a way as one could do in such a movie. Sydney Sweeney, just playing like the innocent girl, is like, what's going on? Like, I like her. I like this. I would have rather seen a movie with her, to be honest. The other 2 Spider Women, not real. I mean, they're okay, but they all just sort of bleed together. I would say Sydney Sweeney's the interesting standout. There is definitely something about her. She's definitely going to become more and more popular as things go. But the other 2 actors, the other 2 girls, never. I'm still unclear who he is, why he's in a black Spider-Man suit, and because of these weird Amazonian Spider-Men. Talk about a whole nother backstory of like, well, where are these guys? Where'd they come from? There's just so much unraveling in this world. That's why it was always my problem with the comics too. There's just too many characters in the universe that are connected, and I always found that kind of stupid. Like, I like my more grounded, like, realistic things, and they're like, oh, that's crazy that this happened, and now you're in a world where that happened. But it's like the Flash TV show. I lost interest when everybody becomes a speedster. And, oh, then you're gonna have more speedsters. Like, why is every version of it more spider people? And then everyone's connected to the spider people. It's just too... It's where these comic book movies always lose me. And this movie is just yet another one. Ben Parker's in the movie, of course, because he's got to be friends with Cassie Webb. And, ooh, what does that mean? I don't know, but it's all so silly. it's all just so unnecessary. And Sony, my God, why did you make this movie? Why? I don't understand what they're doing. Craven the Hunter looks so boring. Okay, it's got blood, red blood. Yay, cool, it's gonna be violent. I don't need that movie. I don't need any of these movies. I want a good Tom Holland movie. Keep the franchise going. Have him show up. Actually, it was interesting. I saw Amy Pascal, who's in charge of Sony, with Lord and Miller. They were talking about, when's the Miles Morales movie coming? And she admitted, she's like, well, not after until we have 2 more movies coming, and more important.
All right.
Beyond the Spider-Verse 2 and
Got
the next
that.
Tom Holland film. They're focused on those 2 right now. And the reporter's like, oh, come on, tell me something on the spreadsheet. There must be something. And it was Lord or Miller, I forget which one's which, but he laughs. You think there's a spreadsheet? Ha! And it was funny. He was funny, but it was also kind of depressing because I could see his pain, where it's like it's hard enough to make that whole universe, the animated world that they're trying to finish and get done and make it look beautiful. But this idea that the whole Sony universe is actually planned and that there's someone smart at the helm of it all, there isn't. And this is yet another proof of it. Madam Web is just unnecessary, it's dumb, it's just stupid. No matter how likable the actors are, no matter how much everyone's trying their damnedest, there's no action. Devoid of any good action. The premise makes no sense. Her powers make no sense. Her powers are too powerful if and when she learns how to tell the future. Oh my God, how do you beat that? It's just like, why would you introduce that? So she can just tell the future, okay? The 3 Spider Women, why are they there? It's never really clarified. I don't know why. Why aren't they Spider Women in the damn movie? You'd think that's what you'd want with the trailer, but no, they're just teasing you with images of Sydney Sweeney looking cool in that outfit and the other 2, just because they realized we need more. That's clearly what people want to see, not Madam Web. The whole everyone's making fun of, like, my mom's got bitten by a spider in the outlet. There's a ton of it. There's such cheesy, silly dialogue. And again, I will admit, they're trying their damnedest, but none of it works. None of it works. This movie is dumb, dumb, dumb. They made me watch it in the middle of the afternoon. I couldn't even bring a guest. F you, Sony. You're trying to decide, polish a turd. This movie's sadly a turd. I would wait till it's on streaming at some point if you're really, really, really desperate. This is not a movie that's going to save cinemas. This is the exact type of movie that I think is ruining theaters. It's just a very bad, mediocre at best, unnecessary, just superhero nonsense. We can do better than this. Have faith in a good director and put in good actors and focus on a story that makes sense. That's what we want, not Madam Web. Are you guys gonna see it? Are you excited? What are your thoughts? Thank you for watching my car review. More coming here on Movie World Plus. So hit that subscribe button, will ya? Alright, I gotta stop this. Bye, everybody.
Everybody, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe to Low Effort Clips. That's right, Low Effort Clips, right here on YouTube.com. Yeah, and hit the notification bell. Yeah.
Star Wars has been in a very bad place, and over the past few years, with every single project they've released, there's been some kind of controversy that surrounded them. But now, Star Wars lead Ewan McGregor is making a desperate plea asking fans to write to Disney for a second season of Obi-Wan. I have a few things to show off, but before we get into the topic, if you enjoy the content I create, check out the links in the description, follow me on social media, and consider supporting through Patreon or via YouTube memberships. Now, I think that as an actor, he's not half bad, but I think as an individual, he's definitely made a lot of questionable decisions over the years in the movies that he's picked and the PR that he's done for those movies. This is a Bounding Into Comics article. It says, in making a request that perhaps only he and 7 other Disney Star Wars fans truly want to see fulfilled, Obi-Wan Kenobi has to write to Disney in order to petition them for a second season of the Disney Plus series. Now, I initially was so excited for Obi-Wan season 1 because I was really hoping that it would be focused on Obi-Wan and we would have so many other character cameos, of course, most notably Anakin / Darth Vader. And while we did get half of what people were expecting, the other half was just extremely disappointed. Like some of the side characters, they added like Reva. She was a very controversial character, and of course the fact that they basically made it the Leia show. While I do love Leia as a character, she just was not really needed as much as she was put in this series. I felt like they really oversaturated the entire season with her, and that's why I think a lot of people did not end up enjoying Obi-Wan Kenobi season 1 and why most people do not want a season 2. But it says the longtime franchise star made his plea during a panel appearance following a conversation regarding his time on set filming the solo Star Wars series. He revealed that at the end of the day he was very happy with how the production ultimately turned out, which is great. As an actor, you want to be proud of what you created, and even if nobody else is really that thrilled with it, at least he is. I guess that's something. But he also then admitted, I just hope we can do another one, before turning to ask the MegaCon attendees for their help in making that happen. Can everyone write to Disney? If we just, I'll give you some email addresses at the end, just say, Dear Disney, let's have another, let's have a bit more of Obi-Wan Kenobi, please. And this comes across as so desperate. You should not be begging people to watch your content. That is so petty as an actor, especially when you're someone as big as him, right? I get it. He loves Star Wars. He loves playing Obi-Wan, and I do think that he has done this character a lot of justice over the years. Don't get me wrong, but I still just think that an Obi-Wan season 2 is off the table at this point for not only Disney, but also fans. I think that they've kind of come to understand that fans will most likely not watch a season 2, and of course they could always go ahead and greenlight one anyway, but it's not on their schedule for the next few years unless they decide to randomly add that in. And again, I just think that this is so petty. As an actor, he knows Disney Star Wars has completely fallen off, so he has to ask people to take time out of their day and beg this company for another season, even though, again, he's a bigger actor. It's not like he hasn't been in a lot over the years and he's primarily just been in Star Wars. That is not the case at all whatsoever, but I don't think that they would greenlight a season 2, but I also think that fans would be furious because of the way that he has treated us before when Obi-Wan season 1 released, and even before that he has attacked fans of franchises that he has worked on. Of course, I'm sure that you'll all remember Ewan McGregor stands behind Moses Ingram following her claims of fan racism. If you're sending her bullying messages, you're no Star Wars fan in my mind. So he's saying, oh yes, if you went and bullied this actress, which by the way, we never really saw any proof that she was being bullied, you're no Star Wars fan in my mind. Yet now he's basically asking every Star Wars fan to go ahead and write to Disney, begging them for another season of this show. Again, he's not a half-bad actor, but at the same time, he blindly supported, Disney and Moses Ingram's claims that she was receiving, hordes of racist backlash when all we were doing was criticizing maybe her acting skills at some points, but also her character. Reva was just a random character that nobody had asked for, nobody particularly liked, and they have tried to sell merchandise for her character since the show came out, and it all sold terribly. Like, they had a Reva lightsaber, which did abysmally. They had Reva action figures, which also did not do good. It's not about her skin color, it is about the way her character was written. Half of the things that happened with her character didn't make sense, but also people just did not like the show in general. I mean, Moses Ingram said a lot that killed a lot of hype about how she prepared for racist backlash. The decision with Vader, where he lets her live, was ridiculous. Then highlighting Leia in this show wasn't awful, but people expected less of her, and the focus to be solely on Obi-Wan. And to make it even worse, he also admitted that they were not even going to add Leia as the main child in the scenario. It was supposed to be Luke, Disney Plus was originally going to be a story about me and Luke, which is ultimately what everybody wanted. Having some of Leia in there would have been fantastic as well, don't get me wrong, but we got no Luke when people wanted Luke and Obi together. That would have been so fantastic to see the dynamic of that relationship and how it grew over the years. That is what people wanted, and if they had done this, people would have been so much more pleased with the series. But Ewan McGregor is no stranger to controversy and to attacking people. When he had worked on Birds of Prey, which was another abysmal movie, he said he was proud to be in a film that was a feminist film and that tackled misogyny. And to top all of this off, if you did not know, he is married to Mary Elizabeth Winstead, who of course was in Scott Pilgrim. She has been in Star Wars, and over the years, yes, she has been the star in several feminist projects or female-centric projects that clearly have a bit of a narrative behind them. So it just kind of, all has added up and not in his favor, because there are so many people who say, yeah, you played a good Obi-Wan once long ago in a galaxy far, far away, but we just are not really that big of a fan of you anymore, because you have made several decisions, again, like attacking fans. You don't do that. You don't attack fans and call them racists and misogynists, but then also go and beg for their support. Not even 2 years later, you go and beg them to write to Disney because you are so desperate for another season of this show. If season 1 was more in line with what fans wanted, it would have went spectacularly, at least in my opinion. Obviously, we'll never know because that's not the iteration of the show we got, but it's just so unfortunate to see an actor basically have to beg for another season of a show and completely not understand why Obi-Wan season 1 did not do all that well for them in terms of viewership or ratings. But that's all that I really had to discuss in this video. Let everyone know your thoughts in the comment section down below. If you enjoyed this, give it a like, and if you didn't, give it a dislike. I appreciate your support either way, but I will talk to you all again in the next video really soon.
Well, the woke-ites are at it again, and this is a news story that was clipped here. I've not actually read the news story, but it looks like there's a teenager charged with attempted murder after transgender girl stabbed 14 times at a party. Well, stabbings are bad, and that kind of violence is ridiculous, and of course, oh gosh, I really am going full you boys act today. I'm super sick. There's a reason I'm off camera, and I'm working into this. I've got like a massive fever, a terrible cough. I don't know what it is. Cancer, AIDS. I might be dead tomorrow. I promised Tom from Midnight's Edge that I'd be giving him my Star Trek comic book collection if I die. So hopefully he enjoys. Alright. Hi, hit the like and subscribe button. Hey, I do the work here, guys. I'm working hard. Even though I'm sick, I've got to bring you guys the news. The news doesn't rest for anybody. And this is a wild sort of deal. They call it an alleged hate crime. We don't know if the person was stabbed because they're trans or whatever. That's all like in somebody's head. I mean, it could have just been two people fighting, and we know that like transgenders are mentally ill. Maybe they started it. We don't know. But nobody should get stabbed. I definitely am not in favor of stabbings. So
just because on the letter it had a stick figure hanging from a tree with a gun pointing towards it. Did I make that up too? Absolutely.
What happened that night, Jesse?
I can't tell you honestly. It was a Muslim or a Mexican or someone black. We started tussling, it was very icy, and they ran off. And I saw where they ran, and my manager was still on the phone. So I picked up the phone and I said, Brandon, and he's like, what's going on? But I said, hey, I'm gonna run to Subway, which was across the street, and I'm gonna get a salad if you want it. And then I look down and I see that there's a rope around my neck, which I hadn't.
You hadn't noticed it before?
No, because it was so fast.
So what do you say to a young gay man, a young gay person?
I want a little gay boy. I understand how difficult it will be to find him, but we gotta.
Thank you, Jesse.
What's wrong, everyone? Jeremy here from the quartering. I have an excellent update for you. You're just gonna love this. It turns out that Juicy Sommelier. You might know him as Jussie Smollett. Most of us know him as Jussie Smollett, the French actor, the one that faked a terrible crime with the sole purpose of tearing this country apart, with the sole purpose of enriching himself. It turns out may have made a very big tactical decision in trying to appeal his conviction. Now, I knew this at the time, that it was only going to get worse for him, but now it looks like it is going to get worse for him, and it couldn't be happening to a bigger piece of garbage, a more deserving person on the planet. Here, this article, Jussie Smollett appealing his crime hoax conviction wasn't the smartest decision, according to expert. Empire actor Jussie Smollett petitioned the Illinois Supreme Court to intervene in his conviction. Jussie Smollett's decision to continue to appeal his crime hoax conviction was, quote, not the smartest move for the disgraced actor. An expert familiar with the case told Fox News Digital. Well, I wouldn't think that it is very... I mean, I don't think Jussie Smollett is a particularly smart individual, and I don't think this was a particularly smart decision. Smollett filed a petition on February 5th requesting the Illinois High Court to intervene in his ongoing legal drama. By the way, all this is to avoid, what, a 6-month sentence? He could have been out by now. If he had actually just gone in at the time he was convicted, he probably would have served 2 weeks, maybe, and been let out. Like, almost certainly, he would have been out way before his full 6-month sentence. Like, there's no question about it. Everyone else gets out early, and he's a Hollywood actor. He's been out he probably would have been out in a week or 2 weeks, tops. And he would have sat in solitary confinement for that entire time and never had to deal with the unwashed masses. A jury previously found Smollett guilty on 5 of the 6 charges of disorderly conduct after nearly 2-week trial in 2021. Smollett, who is black and gay, reported to the Chicago police that, of course, 2 white guys in downtown Chicago told him that it was MAGA country and put a piece of rope around his neck, which, of course, never happened. Nobody believed it happened even at the time he said it did. Quote, I agree, the smartest move would have been to do the time and get it behind him, branding expert Eric Schiffer told Fox News Digital. These moments where you are revisiting the facts of the case in which he severely damaged his trust with the public further reinforces him as a personality the public can't trust. Instead, had he just done the time, he could have begun to rebuild himself and his story and focus on new things, Schiffer added. This could have included projects, community service, or nonprofits where the narrative isn't the overhang of how he tried to pull a giant fraud on the public. Yeah, I think that's fair. Smollett was sentenced to just 150 days, so it wasn't even 6 months. It was barely over 4 months. Call it 5 months, I guess, to be fair. It was 5 months. But he would have probably done a month at most. I'm certain he wouldn't have done more than a month before getting let out. Of course, then he also had to pay for all the overtime and everything else like that. The Empire actor wants his conviction overturned. Quote, what should have been a straightforward case has been complicated by the intersection of politics and public outrage, Smollett's attorney wrote in the new filing. What do you mean? Does anybody who exactly doesn't think that he lied about it? I mean, everybody knows he lied. Everybody does. And so I'm not exactly sure what could have gotten complicated by it. The whole thing was a joke. They repeated an argument from previous appeals saying that his 2021 trial violated his Fifth Amendment protections against double jeopardy, which it didn't, or being punished for the same crime. They said he already performed community service and forfeited a $10,000 bond as part of a 2019 deal with Cook County State's Attorney's Office to drop the initial 16 counts of disorderly conduct. Well, yeah, if you remember, the individual who was behind that, I believe her name was Kim Fox, was corrupt. I think also, she took a phone call from Big Mike Obama. I don't know if you know, if you've heard of Big Mike Obama, but he also sometimes goes by Michelle, calling in personal favors for Jussie Smollett too. The whole the whole system's corruption was on full display for everyday Americans who I believe, at least if you believe like I do, believe that he should have served every single day of that 150-day sentence because he was perfectly fine inflaming race relations, a time in which race relations in this country were, in my, the worst they've been in 100 years, right? 50 years at least, to enrich himself and get better roles. That's why he did it. He didn't do it because he was mentally ill or suffering a breakdown. He did it for attention and fame. Eric Anderson, counsel at Early, Sullivan, Wright, Geiser, and McRae, told Fox News Digital, quote, "If you have the resources to fight a conviction, then you should use those resources." Oh, wow, a lawyer said you should hire lawyers? Oh, wow, shocking. One of the problems with our justice system is the ability to challenge hinges on whether or not wealth or access to wealth of a defendant or the goodwill of those willing to do the work at a reduced or no cost to the defendant. True. Smollett has a 50-50 chance of having his conviction overturned. I don't believe he does. According to Anderson, if the Illinois Supreme Court were to take up Smollett's case, they shouldn't, by the way, they'll likely focus on one of Smollett's 5 arguments behind the appeal, the legal expert explained. Smollett's legal team is arguing that the state breached its no pros agreement or a non-prosecution agreement by indicting him in the hate crime hoax. In the agreement, Smollett had been told he could perform community service, forfeit his bond, and the case would be dismissed. Yes, from a corrupt office. I don't think she even works there anymore. If I am correct, I don't think Kim Fox is involved anymore there. Is she? God, I hope she isn't. Anderson noted that the Illinois Supreme Court could want to answer questions specifically around his argument, such as just how much value can one rely upon a negotiated no pros in the state. He detailed how detailed must the argument be. Smollett's legal case is going to be seen as poison for casting, Anderson added, but having his conviction overturned could be good not only for his life, but for his career. No, he should do every one of those 150 days. Every single one of them. Not a day less. Schiffer, chairman of Reputation Management Consultants, believes Smollett can rebuild himself, but he needs time to heal his reputation. When you keep reminding the public constantly of what a giant con and fraud you were attempting to pull, that's not the best strategy for trying to rebuild in Hollywood. Well, I would say that Hollywood doesn't probably care, to be honest with you, but the general public does. And like I said, this was in 2021. I can't even believe that. Man, I've been doing this job too long. 2021. Okay? That means he would have already been out of prison for over 2 years by now. Actually, 2020. He would have been out of prison for 2 going on 3 years by now. No one would have even remembered it. Well, I guess people would have. But now he's back in the headlines again. I get to make another video reminding people that this loser exists. Reminding that the funniest part too about this is it's all his ego. His ego, okay, is what got him into this trouble in the first place. He thought he deserved more money, he thought he deserved more screen time, more roles, this, that, and the other thing. His ego wouldn't let him go to prison. His ego said he has no thoughts of self-harm, and raised his black power fist to the sky as he was getting carried away. His ego has caused him to want to, he continues, he needs memories to fade, and headlines and stories associated to him that are about rebuilding his life, focusing on things that would help the community and projects that he may be in and are new, and not further headlines that are tied to his terrible choices. Well, the comments, he is guilty, needs to face consequences. Too many people are never held accountable for these days because too many people feel sorry for them, or lawyers and politicians make excuses for them. I agree. His lawyer said he has a 50-50 chance of getting it overturned. That attorney has a 100% chance of getting paid either way. He should have been sentenced to twice a jail term a criminal would have gotten if he actually was a hate crime. What he did was very wrong. Of course, I mean, I agree. I 100% agree. The fact that he's trying to go to the Supreme Court in all of this is embarrassing for him. You know, this is just 2 months ago. Of course, his conviction over stage attack upheld by Illinois court. So now his last-ditch effort is going to be to go to the Supreme Court, which I hope that they don't even hear it. Because why would you even need to take this to the Supreme Court? Everybody with 2 sets of eyes Heck, anybody with one set of eyes, right, can see that he faked this. The evidence is overwhelming. There's nothing to appeal here. He is guilty beyond a reasonable doubt, and because he's got such a stupid ego, he's going to continue to appeal it. He should have been out of prison years ago. But now he's going to keep putting his name in the headlines, and people are going to keep dunking on him, and I'm absolutely here for it. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please do leave a like on it. If you haven't yet, please do follow down below, and we'll talk to you again real soon.
Today we're checking out abruptly chaotic moments. Like this man. Absolutely getting betrayed. As long as he doesn't do that in the battlefield. This man sees his girlfriend on the couch. But he's here for the PlayStation. She knows. Speaking of Spider-Man, she's got the senses.
Did any of it spill?
No, not at all. Not even an ounce. I'm all for thrills. But I feel like my guts would projectile vomit out right then and there. Witness this man almost dying twice. So close. Oh god. What an action sequence. Look at what this guy's got.
Scary, isn't it?
Pay very close attention. Because I have no clue where that came from. This is quite literally an abrupt stop.
Sorry. I'm so sorry.
This guy seems like such a sweetheart though. What a gentleman. What a nice guy. This one's not so wholesome. Nobody thinks to go up on that hill, maybe warn these people that they're about to die. Ginny loves seeing this happen for some reason. Terrible. So much damage. Why are there so many videos like this? I feel like these are planned now. Like, there's just more and more disasters. It just involves more and more crates every time. It's almost like they set these things up to fall like dominoes now. The man attacked a Las Vegas judge during sentencing today. Oh my god, that guy's going at it too. He fucking flew. Holy shit. You really committed on that one.
Name a country beginning with V.
Finland.
Finland.
Don't chat to me, you said what? You want some jolting?
I want to know what you mean. V.
Ooh.
He's jolting to me right now.
Isn't that an anime? Vinland Saga? Yeah, this dude been on Netflix. You see too much anime, dude.
You better run.
Why? I don't think I'll have to run, quite frankly. No offense to your speed abilities.
You think so?
I think I'm probably faster walking backwards. As I just proved.
Oh, god. You're gonna come out walking all tough like that and be like, actually, you're right.
I kind of wanted to see the running.
I
I
did
wanted
too.
to see her
I
cardio.
did. I wanted to see her prove him wrong.
Prove him wrong.
Prove him wrong. Perfect in multiple.
I'll just stop right there.
Who the fuck is this guy? Who is this guy? I think they're all very good at making a surprise face.
And screaming at the last second.
Yeah, exactly. Now they're trying out the dog shock collar. Oh no. Oh. I was like, oh no, I think she likes it. I think you gotta start taking that to the bedroom now. How could he not know?
Hey, yo, look at that Honda.
Your car's important. What do you do for a living? Just curious.
He doesn't speak English.
Oh, any industry that he works in?
He is Horacio Pagani.
Oh!
He is the man himself, Pagani. Panini, yes. He makes sandwiches. Italian sandwiches.
But who is he?
The creator of the Pagani brand. That's his car.
It's a brand?
Pagani's. You're conceited to be driving your own car, but you know, can't charge $4 million.
Wait, Ferrari is named after the guy Ferrari, right?
Yeah.
Never mind. He's normal.
Wow. Wow. I thought thought she was the blanket for a second. I thought like she got ragdolled into the wall, and I was like, wow, rip. She just killed me. No offense. It blew so hard you can almost see the shape of her ass cheeks through the blanket that is stuck onto her. It's incredible. Rival jersey pushes American football fan to the edge.
Nobody likes you. Your team sucks. Get a gym membership, pal. Is it?
It's not the fuck.
I'll swing the hey. Oh.
Hey, sports fans.
Oh, it's on holding back.
Yeah, sports.
You talk shit first, buddy. Come on, eat it. Oh my gosh.
We already won.
What's going on?
Yeah, that's what I thought. I was like, dude, what you said was like way more over the line than get a gym membership. Well, that's crossing the line there, man. I can't believe you suggested I lose weight. What's that? Oh, he's dead.
That's fucking terrifying.
She should have poked him in the asshole. Nobody cannot react to a poke in the asshole. Is this a prank though?
Wait, so poke a man's butthole and he'll wake up instantly?
No, actually that's not true.
Okay,
I don't know
well,
where I heard that
that's
from.
pretty true. I think that's what I'm gonna do next time.
Willie steals parking space by standing.
Are you kidding? No way.
Yeah, I think
You're not even in a car, woman. Are you serious?
No. Get out of here. Are you kidding?
There's a
You're not
count,
in the
dude.
car. Get out.
You're
No, it doesn't
Are you kidding me? You serious right now?
This should be illegal though, actually.
Yeah.
Should be able to physically move them out of the spot with your car on top of them.
This is a car parking spot, not a woman parking spot.
No, buddy, you got him good. Hit me.
I'm gonna stand here all day. I got time.
Oh my god, the mom's coming
Stand
out.
here. I don't care, dude.
Oh, he's gonna block the car so that they can't
Yeah.
come apart. Legends say they were both here for 48 hours.
Not moving. Wrong side road. Excuse me. Wrong side of the wheel. Really? You're on the wrong side of the wheel.
Gotta love all these stubborn ass people these days, huh? Completely willing to die, take bodily harm in order to prove their point and win. And also this person willing to take a frontal hit by a person on a bike.
Yeah, also, this lady has 2 dogs. I would with her.
Yeah, I get that girl's a dumbass bitch. I still wouldn't sacrifice my body over it. If there were car reactions in the 1800s.
Oh, Bacon would just drop, bro. Yeah, I just saw it. Play it, hurry up.
Where are these guys from? Well, Pete is from
Greatest songs of all time. Like, can you imagine how
South
that
Dakota.
first came out?
He's from a Dakota, I'm pretty sure. I don't. And this guy is Peter Cimetti from Alterna Comics. I don't know where he's based, but Pete's from Culturescape. Peter is from Alterna Comics, and Peter here is from Culturescape. Here, I'll turn on the sound for a little bit. This is kind of a bigger, a well-known guest in the internet sphere, so I try not to leak out spoilers. Not that there's never more than 3 to 5 people who watch me edit. So, and that's a high number, so.
No recording out here. Sir, I'm exercising my First Amendment rights.
Baron Rat levels and things like that. And then we some of these. So we even have some of these here where, like, here's the King Cryptid card. And then we got like the power levels and things like that. And then we've got a card for this character called Baron Rat. And
I was pausing to see if it's maybe in higher definition.
He's a mischievous guy, and on the back of it, he like scrawls all over his card here, puts his power levels up to the max. So
That's
it's like we
awesome.
have fun with it too, and then the background, they all kind of connect and make like a forming image in the back of it. But those were inspired by some of those cards from back in the early 90s. They did such a great job. It was so much fun.
So what led you to thinking that you wanted, though, to not just be a reader, but a creator? What was the switch for young Peter?
People don't even give that reaction from hitting like the game winner in game
For young Peter.
finals.
Now I'm so scared if it were a girl.
Yeah, I feel like if it were a girl, he would just like beat his wife like then and there or something.
He slaps dad for snoring.
Oh.
Oh, he's going. He's going.
He's considering it.
Wait.
Oh, that's kind of the worst. Someone who's like that deep of a sleeper and snores like that.
Does booty slap really hurt that much?
They get hurt according to that fucking scream.
Scene in comics, and thought, well, maybe I can kind of go that path instead.
My friend's mom in my video.
Oh, what a watch party, man. You got the Christmas lights out, got this big ass couch. This is where the boys get together.
Goalie breaks player's stick using the
So to not just be a reader, but a creator. What was the switch for young Peter?
I think it always went hand in hand with me, because the more I would read the comics and learn about the characters through the cards and whatnot, the more I would design my own and make my own characters. And I always wanted to end up one day maybe working for one of those companies, and I didn't really care to like give my take on a character that already existed, because to me they were real. You know, I knew they weren't real necessarily, but they were as real as one of those.
Oh, I thought he was gonna get run over by a taxi. Or she wasn't letting him cry.
Characters could be where they
literally a psycho.
What if he bought the taxi, paid for like
had a
the next
specific kind of personality, a specific history. They were who they were, and that was it. So I like that about them, and I like them being that way, but I wanted to invent characters to be with them. So as I started,
Is this Percy and Cream? Oh, he's going after him. Oh, he's crying. He can't understand you, dude. He's not Korean. How does it feel that when people
started going down that path as a kid and just come up with my own characters that would kind of exist within the world of these pre-existing characters, it got more and more towards me just kind of creating my own worlds and my own characters. And at first I did want to go down that road, but when Marvel had gone bankrupt, essentially, I believe around 96, with a variety of things that were going on in the industry at that time, it kind of made me, even at 12 years old, go, I don't know if I want to or can do this anymore. Maybe there's not a future in comics. So I kind of went away from comics for a little bit after that. The comics I thought in quality had noticeably diminished, and I still read and loved like some of the older ones that I could find here and there, but it seemed like the industry was really turning. So I thought maybe I'll still just do something creatively in graphic design or some kind of periphery of the comic book industry. And then around, I'd say probably by the time I was going to college, around 2000 to 2002, I got back into comics again and really started learning more about the independent scene in comics, and thought, well, maybe I can kind of go that path instead.
Yeah, the history of comic, the 90s was such a big change for it. I'm just old enough to remember, I was 8 or 9. There was like a Shopko and a Kmart like within 6 blocks of where we lived. And so, sometimes I could just, go down the street, go to Shopko, and there, on a little spindle rack were comics. And I think I bought a lot of like Archie with like Sonic. I know I'm a giant weeb, and then all of a sudden one day they were gone, and you could have. It was like, where'd they go? No one has it. Where'd they go? And little young Peter, I didn't even know what. I was like, what happened? But it's so weird. That's how it used to be. Comics used to be like affordable.
Is this a sleepover, my guy?
What happened? But it's so weird. That's how it. Like, what happened? But it's so weird. That's how it used to be.
Is GTA aware that that's not physically possible, no matter how expensive your brakes are?
Well, I think physically possible.
What happened? But it's so weird. That's how it used to be. Comics used to be like affordable and available. It was just like something you picked up, like you get a candy bar or your gossip rag, Oh.
Well, and years later,
rag, Oh.
Oh my god. That took Butters a long time to react to that, huh? Goddamn.
Butters is kind of slow.
He is, yeah. So, and we're trying to
time,
drive off
and
recently caught karma.
Peter doesn't have his dog in his lap this week, so there's a lot less little noises I need to remove.
Industry, the newsstand.
Bro, he stayed on that whole time?
Well, because you didn't get paid.
That's a hard
Negative. We only sent them a certain amount.
Yeah,
How could they report back?
Yes, it is.
We only sent them a certain amount.
I guess they're just, people are just gonna watch.
Yeah, I don't understand the point for
How could they report back in the negative?
Because, I mean, nobody wants to get hurt over somebody else's bike.
Yeah, and that man is holding like a...
He's holding a weapon as well, so just keep throwing things at him until he's too physically hurt to continue removing the bike.
I'm gonna buy some strawberries, and I'm offering exactly the right amount of money here on the help desk. So you people take that money.
I didn't even know what. I was like, what happened? But it's so weird. That's how it used to be. Comics used to be like affordable and available. It was just like something you picked up, like you get a candy bar or your gossip rag, Oh.
Well, and years later, fast forward a bit to 2017 when we came out with the newsprint line. I started learning that when we went to go to newsstand, especially, that abrupt, in some places almost overnight, kind of leaving of the newsstand was still fresh in many retailers' minds. It wasn't an easy task trying to get comics, especially comics that were not having any kind of clout or brand recognition behind.
Okay, I gotta listen to what he's saying.
Thing you picked up, like you get a candy bar or your gossip rag, Oh.
Well, and years later, fast forward a bit to 2017 when we came out with the newsprint line. I started learning that when we went to go to newsstand, especially, that abrupt, in some places almost overnight, kind of leaving of the newsstand was still fresh in many retailers' minds. It wasn't an easy task trying to get comics, especially comics that were not having any kind of clout or brand recognition behind them. Wasn't easy getting that into newsstands, and then they were really leery about it, and they didn't really have much sales.
This is the spot.
For not having any kind of clout.
Through all these years working for something, and they
Pay attention. I have to pay attention.
Well, and years later, fast forward a bit to 2017 when we came out with the newsprint line. I started learning that when we went to go to newsstand, especially, that abrupt, in some places almost overnight, kind of leaving of the newsstand was still fresh in many retailers' minds. It wasn't an easy task trying to get comics, especially comics that. It wasn't an easy task.
Taking notes for the intro.
Trying to get comics, especially comics that were not having any kind of clout or brand recognition behind them. Wasn't easy getting that into newsstands, and then they were really leery about it, and they didn't really have much sales to kind of compare to. Comics were still in newsstand in some capacity at that point in time in like Barnes & Noble and Books A Million, but in terms of like outside of that, at places like it's a grocery store or just a convenience store or any other kind of store that would have had a spinner rack back in the day, it was almost impossible to get them back into those places because of the fact that they had just such a bad taste in their mouth for what had transpired.
2243. Bad taste.
It was almost impossible to get them back into those places because of the fact that they had just such a bad taste in their mouth for what had transpired in the 90s, and they just kind of abandoned the idea of putting comics back into the stores. It was really interesting when we were in the newsstand and we had purchased a promotional placement at the registers of Toys R Us, the top 200 Toys R Us stores, right before they had closed, and this was in the holiday time. And they, talking to a Toys R Us rep, were actually really happy about the fact that they were getting in all ages comics.
I remember buying, I remember seeing comic books at Toys R Us in the 90s. I have some comics that were purchased at a Toys R Us from the 90s, like the 3-part Venom the Madness series. I remember I saw that at Toys R Us, and I think I got it for Easter, like a month later. Yeah, comic books used to totally be in Toys R Us. I saw at Walmart maybe like a year and a half ago. They have this section up front that has all the Magic and Pokemon cards, and I would see they had some comic books there, and what they would do, they would take a lot of modern Marvel books and they would wrap them up in a package, and you could buy like a stack of new comics, most of them mystery, for a price. And I recognized, I'm like, oh, this is the stuff that's like was on the stand a few months ago. So they've been trying things to get comics back in stores, but so much mismanagement over the years.
Back into these stores at the register because they had such a difficult time getting comics that they felt were appropriate enough to put at the register, that were both going to be interesting and were truly all ages, not just like our all ages comics. Even though they were kid appropriate, they weren't necessarily aimed solely at kids. We had a lot of adults enjoying them as well, and they were really taken back by that, and they really liked it. And they said because the whole industry felt like it was getting too focused on adults, and the comics were getting too dark, so they didn't really feel too comfortable putting those at the register. But they thought that our comics that we had offered, it was like 4 or 5 of them at the time, that those titles were really great, and it reminded them a lot of the kinds of comics that were essentially all ages years prior. And we did really well in that spot, which was great. But unfortunately for Toys R Us, and we did
2413. We did really well. Probably going to combine all 3 of these notes I took into one clip.
Really well in that spot, which was great. But unfortunately for Toys R Us, and also in some way for us too, they ended up going under a few months after that. And we still have customers though with us since that promotional placement, which is great. But it's tough. It's a crazy industry, the newsstand especially. it's difficult because it's full returnability. There's no accountability. It's a very strange system at this point. And we were discovering that essentially, back in the day, they used to rip the covers off or do something to give you a proof of life. Here's the thing that we're not going to sell it anymore, even though there's a lot of stories about them still kind of selling the comics ripped off covers. But it got even worse. When we were in there, we were noticing that we would get returns in the negatives. So if we sent them like 3,000, we would eventually show up in return sheets as they totaled. Maybe 8 months into it, you'd see returns going to like 3,021, 3,030. And I'm like, how is that possible? How are we getting returns in the negative? We only sent them a certain amount.
Yeah,
How
that's
could
weird.
they report back in the negative? Which means that they're them a certain amount.
Yeah,
How
that's
could
weird.
they report back in the negative? Are we getting returns in the negative? We only sent them a certain amount.
Yeah,
How
that's
could
weird.
they report back in the negative? Which means that they're reporting back more returns than what they even had registered as being received. And I was finding out that the people who were working at these places were scanning. They scanned the barcodes on the covers now. And then that's how they registered what was being returned. So in many cases, what was happening was like, let's say there's a certain title, and then let's say you gave them 10, and now maybe 3 sold. Well, they would scan 3, the 3 that were there, and then they would essentially scan the rest of them that had sold off. So you would get these return numbers all skewed. And then sometimes they would also not scan the proper titles. So if you had titles that were maybe like $1 or $2 or $3 more than a certain one, and they misscan it, and they just kind of scanned them all, thinking they were all worth the same amount, you could end up selling more of a certain title, but maybe your returns showed that you got more returns in for the expensive book. So after 2 years of insanity with that and seeing that it was not a good system for us, we got out of that. And I've had my frustrations with Diamond over the years, but Diamond, I do have to say, was the best distributor that we worked with. And I'm not exactly going to be like touting Diamond because we had a lot of problems with them, but they were better than Newsstand, and they were better than dealing with the book distribution system too. So it's an interesting conversation, the distribution system in comics. It's kind of all over the place, and there's a lot to be said for it, and there's also a lot that
I've
should
been
be
editing an hour
spoken up
already.
about it.
Jesus fucking
Yeah,
Christ.
I find that so interesting about Alternative because you guys have tried looking up basically every avenue to try to sell your books. I know you said it's kind of weird to call going back to newsprint as innovation, but for those who aren't regular comic book readers, there was a flip in the production of comic books that they were going to use a higher quality standard of paper, but at a higher cost. And so then that was part of course, with inflation, the price of a comic book went up and up. And you even on your website, you could go to Alternative Comics right now on your website. You can buy single issues for $2 and some cents. If I go to a comic book store, I'm usually, if I'm lucky, I'm paying $4 something for a single issue, sometimes $7 something. It can add up, and it's a big difference for a consumer because it's like an add-on versus, it used to be like my friend Neon over at Clownfish TV says, when he was a kid, he could just go pick up the entire line of Marvel for the month, and he could do it just with his lawn mowing money. But that just isn't the case anymore, and it's like so many of the problems of comics, like you were also referring to here. It's like comic books went from a model where the comics would be where the people were at to now we're going to require people to go out to get the comics. And I mean, not to make this religious or anything, but I mean that's kind of like church. That's kind of the problem there. It's like you kind of have to get the people. They kind of have to want to be there. It's a little harder, That's just my experience, though. But look, no, that's just my experience, though. But
Because to them it's the end of the world. You want all the assholes are laughing their asses off. Oh my god.
Yeah, fuck them kids. This is great. I had a great time watching this.
ChatGPT, show me a bowl of ramen.
Here's the illustration of a
Get rid of the chopsticks.
Here's the revised.
Kind of like this thing that
I apologize for the.
Now they're small.
Let's generate the.
I still see them.
Here's the revised.
Do you see those small brown things?
able to visually show me
Um,
what a pair of chopsticks
Oh, that's a good
it
point.
is-
I don't want to see these two things with my bowl of ramen.
Here's the new
What are those two stick-looking things on the right
Oh, that's a good
it is-
point.
and instead, it's like, no
She can't.
crap anymore. You know, what's wrong with them?
Oh, that's a good
it is-
point.
and instead, it's
Fuck! Sorry.
You would like a bowl of ramen with both a fork and chopsticks, correct? No. Here's the new
wrong with them.
Oh, that's a good
it is-
point.
and instead, it's like, no. Yeah.
AI is shockingly smart, but stupid at the same time. It's insane. The Hopper response
Yeah.
being challenged
Now,
is a bust.
he had like 4 main types.
Yeah, but why waste time on low lives like that? Man?
Yeah, this guy was the first guy I respect to like infinity.
Smooth on for life.
Now,
Degree, go side.
I want to believe that he like works there and he's the last one out. Fear the man who will never know the identity of.
way, and it's unfortunate.
This guy is great because he talks for a long time. Look at how much I'm getting through. My last note was at 24 minutes. Now I'm at the 35-minute mark.
He tapped his car and he completely flipped over and died. Perfectly cut.
To get the comics, and I mean, not to make this religious or anything, but I mean that's kind of like church. You know, that's kind of the problem there. It's like you kind of have to get the people. They kind of have to want to be there. It's a little harder, you know. That's just my experience, though. But
Well, yeah, it's kind of like anything in business. You need the 3 A's. You need affordability, accessibility, and availability. And comics are, at this point in time, I think, striking out on all 3. And it's unfortunate because they don't need to, but I don't think there's a way to go back. A big part of what Newsstand did for them, even though it must have been a frustrating system, seeing like you send 1 million out and maybe you sold 300,000. A part of what it did, other than put comics in as many places as was possible, was that it also allowed the availability of ad revenue to be there. To say, look, we have this many in circulation, and then also they sold through other avenues as well, a lot of direct avenues as well, with anyone who can remember taking out like a comic book subscription and have them shipped to your house. They did that for a long time. So they had a lot of ad revenue that they could have generated, which also helped to keep the cost lower. Because in some cases, especially with these publications, a lot of the time you can get ad revenue right in there and not sell a single issue, but the ad revenue paid for the production of the issue, and not just the printing, but the actual production of the issue, the art and writing and everything. So when your circulation numbers dry up, you can't really boast that to a potential advertiser that this is the potential amount of eyes that could be seen on this product, on this advertisement, and this is why that advertisement is worth what it's worth. So now when you leave that space and you do that, that's going to hit your bottom line in terms of how much that product is going to be able to generate in revenue. Then the other thing that hit is because once they went to kind of like the direct market, and it became like, oh, we're kind of printing our own money, and the direct market being the comic shops with no returnability, and once it goes off to the shop, the retailer, it's their problem now. And that was the mindset that slowly took over with the publishers. I hate when they say the collector bubble.
Robert, to his friends, was mostly known for comedy before Breaking Bad, but his
Is because once they went to kind of like the direct market, and it became like, oh, we're kind of printing our own money, and the direct market being the comic shops with no returnability, and once it goes off to the shop, the retailer, on money, and the direct market
Bob Odenkirk is going to start a new action thriller titled Normal,
And it became like, oh, we're kind of printing our own money. And the direct market being the comic shops with no returnability. And once it goes off to the shop, the retailer, it's their problem now. And that was the mindset that slowly took over with the publishers. I hate when they say the collector bubble burst, right? It's kind of like this thing that it started training people within the industry to blame the customer. That, oh, the customer just doesn't want to buy a caseload of worthless crap anymore. You know, what's wrong with them?
That's a good point.
And instead, it's like, no, the publisher gimmicks were ridiculous, and the customer started to wise up. So, of course, you eventually had this kind of bottleneck.
I think this is going to be the
place
intro right here.
where the
this
customers
part.
would stop buying cases of crap just because you put collector edition on it or whatever it was. And they would eventually go, you know what? I don't think this is going to be worth anything. And in some cases, it wasn't worth anything very quickly. So you had like this secondary market that eventually dried up completely. And then it kind of took, like, think about it like the momentum of a car trying to stop. It's the same thing that occurs here, where the funnel system of the supply chain, you have a dead stop with the customer. They don't really buy anymore. But the retailer's orders are months out. The publisher's line is even more than that. So you have this whole momentum that's like, here's the stopping point, but the retailer is stopping here, and then the publisher is stopping even further because their stuff is already all the way planned back. So you have this whole thing which just gets accordionned up and crunched. And that's what led to the publisher gimmick bubble burst, not the collector bubble burst. Blaming the customer is one of the worst things I think that any business can really do, because once you start blaming...
3220...
on the planet, but they're so proud of what they're saying that they feel the need to want compensation for what it is that they're saying. And some people are dumb enough to actually give them money for it, and they go into these different areas and spout this.
Blaming them for your faults. Man, it is difficult to come back from that. It also it says that you don't take the onus upon yourself to own the mistake that you made, and if you never understand that you made a mistake to begin with, you're going to repeat those mistakes. So we saw a lot of that happen with the comic industry in the 90s, and it's unfortunate that it did occur that way, because what happened was you see all these things, all these gimmicks, all these different lines, all these products kind of spawning out, and what happens is that then you're also distilling your product. So before, you had the idea of, here's maybe 3 or 4 titles of a certain character. Let's say, I don't know, when I was a kid, I was reading Amazing Spider-Man, Web of Spider-Man, Spectacular Spider-Man, and Adjectiveless Spider-Man. So he had like 4 main titles. Now you're looking at, in the 90s, you had this, that, and the other thing all over the place, miniseries here and there. It's a lot like what's happening today. Now you have your product is getting diminished across the board. There's so many avenues of readership, and it's confusing and convoluted in terms of the continuity. But on top of that, what occurs is there is a loss of community. And what I mean by that is the fact that, think if there was just one Spider-Man title. Now, if there's one Spider-Man title being put out, let's say even twice a week, you're still putting out just as many books. But you put out one Spider-Man title twice a week, you have your creative teams on there the same way you would have done it before. Now, all of a sudden, that one Spider-Man title is maybe selling 1 to 2 million a month. And you have 1 to 2 million a month of people reading one title, all talking about what's going on in that one specific title. Think about it in the same way if you have a TV show. If you have a TV show going on, and there's 20 of that TV show and all these spin-offs running around at the same time, you're not going to have that kind of communal feeling of people all kind of talking about the same thing, being on the same page of what was going on, and having this kind of zeitgeist throughout the whole entire atmosphere of it. You're going to have people all over the place that they watch maybe this one and that one and the other one, and then it's going to feel very disjointed. So there's going to be this whole thing just completely spread thin. So when the publishing lines were kind of taking advantage of this, and they were doing this and spreading the characters too thin and the storylines too thin, all of a sudden now you have and all thinking that, like, we just put these out and the customers will buy them. Why wouldn't they? They love this character. Why wouldn't they buy everything? Well, aside from not having enough money, maybe, there's just not enough time. You need time to read them. You need time to know what they're about, if you're going to talk about them, if you're going to be invested. So now if you don't have the time anymore, and now you become a cover collector and you don't read the books anymore, you just kind of keeping up with the Joneses in terms of this character, now you don't even really know what's going on with the book anymore and the character, and that connection that was there is now going to be lost. And so that's happened over the course of, the publishers trained the readers to do this for a real long time. And now you have what we have today, which is kind of repeating the same mistakes that happened 20 to 30 years ago. So it's a shame. It doesn't need to be this way, but it is this way, and it's unfortunate.
Oh, I mean, you had so many good insights there. Unfortunately, I think you're largely correct. I mean, in the last decade, it definitely feels like the customer has gone at least from the media, but it seems like the companies are happy to go along. It looks like the customer gets most of the blame for the problems of the comic book industry.
Yeah.
Anti-blackness is. It is the foundation of all American, all white American institutions.
I don't care about any of this. I don't. Where's the part where it's written that you can black women? Where would I be able to find this? Citation, please. Where would I be able to find something like this? That is something you need a citation for.
Coming out in the corporate side of the industry.
If you don't want me to see that, you don't say something like that. This is why so many people have a problem with these experts going around charging people thousands of dollars on classes on how to dismantle whiteness, because they say the most obscene shit under the planet and nobody check them.
I think whites are psychopathic. I think there are many lies, the level of lying that white people...
Let me ask y'all a question. Who lying harder? White people or the dude who just said there's a law that you can rape black women? Please, pick out who's the liar here. Please, I'm begging y'all. Because this is crazy to me.
People do that have started since colonialism, we're just used to it. Teenagers, young people that are going out and committing home invasion and hitting people, women over the head with objects and stealing their person. I want you to just say that's just human nature.
No.
Of the independent, and we kind of see things come in waves of 25 to 30 years, so generationally we're seeing this kind of, I don't know, I don't want to call it like a golden age, but we're seeing
That'd be theft. That's not human nature.
Yeah, you go, wow, he sounds really pro-black. I am. And for all you white people who are unwilling to admit that you're pro-white, you're just not saying it.
What would you say to folks who may say that your work is considered to be reverse racism?
Honest question.
I don't make room for that.
Yes, you do. You just did. You speak on doing it. Oh my God. If this is the layers in which people gotta operate to prove to themselves that they're somehow beacons of hope, and all they do is spread nonsensical hate, then we're not ever gonna get anywhere. And people know that, but for some reason it's tap dancing. For some reason this is acceptable to say things like that. And then when you get called on it and say, oh, I don't make room for that, you just created a space for that. And you get paid for it. Nobody bothers to check them because they'll sit there and cry about how racist it is that you critique them. That is stupid. Nobody will sit there and listen to that and think, this guy makes a lot of sense. This guy knows what it means to exist in the world and how to dismantle all this hatefulness.
like a new age of independent creation, something that was akin to what it felt like with the excitement of when Image was formed, and then 30 years prior to Image being formed, you saw like the formation of Marvel Comics really coming into its own, and they, for all intents and purposes, were kind of like an independent company at that point in time, because they just were a handful of people for the most part, and even getting National, which was DC at the time, to print their comics for them. So, every 30 or so years, we're noticing cycles in comics, and I think we're seeing another wave about to begin, or it already has begun at least. And it's a good time to be an independent creator, and I think it couldn't come at any better time, because we are seeing so many different weird things coming out in the corporate side of the industry. Or it already has begun at least, and it's a good.
Any city, any jurisdiction, any school district where it is okay or it is law to a black
Good time to be an independent creator.
and bring up any table, guess what? I'm probably going to agree with you that there are women
And I
out
think it
there
couldn't come at any better time
covered by
because
the justice
we
system.
are seeing so many different weird things coming out in the
Makes it
corporate side of the
okay to
industry.
rape a black
Yeah, I
woman.
love the
That is
new
some
Ultimate
justice
Spider-Man
system
books.
that
It's like,
needs to
please
be
don't leave
shaped
me.
and
We
structured
can still do this. We'll be better. We
care
promise.
of a victim instead of having victims feel
We can
scared
still
to
do
come
this.
forward about being assaulted by people. But what we ain't gonna fucking do
We'll be better. We promise.
the same because no way under the sun is that ever going to fly or make any liquid sense. At what point, especially for you
Coming out in the corporate side of the industry.
Yeah, I love the new Ultimate Spider-Man books. It's like, please don't leave me. We can still do this. We'll be better. We promise. They are. I have to admit, they are actually decent. I have enjoyed them, but there's just a scent of desperation about them. So
Yeah. Well,
What-
I can't say that that
scent of desperation about them.
I hope this stops at some point, but because I'm aware
About
that
them.
there are some emotionally unintelligent individuals out there who grasp at this type of content and say, oh my God, it is very informative that you're telling me there's a law out there that you cannot cite where it's somehow okay. We're going
So-
to have
Yeah.
to show more of these examples to beat it into individuals' heads that you cannot be believing a scammer when they're promoting scams in front of your face is true. Subscribe to the channel. I will see you all in the next one. The easiest solution is common conversation, but because dipshits like this try to
Well,
hold all of it by themselves, we won't get anywhere. So I'm glad I'm here to say, fuck off.
Desperation about them.
Yeah. Well,
What-
I can't say that.
Last night we talked about the statement made by Niji Sanji Ian against Solan and
Well,
the
it was-
backlash that they got for it. And about 4 hours after that statement, the Niji Sanji CEO himself issued his own statement, saying in the description, in this video, I read you
Desperation about them.
Yeah. Well, I can't say that that I'm reading that current line, but I hope if they're getting it at all in terms of what's been happening and what's going on. I mean, hopefully they stay that course.
So, do you think the industry?
Likely only having gotten worse since then. And
That
you can see
course.
The majority of the comments are pretty dang critical. In the statement, he a number of apologies and tries to clear up a number of things. Ultimately, consider watching it on your own and making of it what you will. And then later on, another statement was issued, this one on Twitter by Niji Sanji Ian Official, talking about the live stream statement issued by Niji Sanji Ian last night, which as of this morning apparently has over 100,000 dislikes versus 28,000.
I mean, hopefully they stay that course.
So, do you think the industry? I guess.
Declares that it has not made any confidentiality violations while checking the validity of claims made by Solan and her lawyers with its affiliated livers. However, later getting a community note that reads, the post mentions that, quote, our livers are not held by any confidentiality obligation, unquote. This is not true since on Zelensky termination they mentioned, quote,
There's just a scent of desperation about them.
Yeah. Well, I can't say that that I'm reading that current line, but I hope if they're getting it at all in terms of what's been happening and what's going on. I mean, hopefully they stay that course.
So, do you think the industry? I guess this is one of the big questions. Do you think it's going to be a boutique item? You're one of the people that's really worked hard and is really devoted your energies to try to bring it more to the mainstream market. But it seems like the energy, at least I see online from the independent scene, it seems like these are higher cost price entry point comics. You know, they're like $30 to support on a Kickstarter. And you know, they come with all the nice Swish gadgets and everything else, the little add-ons you can get, which is great. But obviously, they're working towards a smaller user base. And I mean, I like all these things. I think what Eric July is doing is really interesting, EVS, et cetera, et cetera. But that isn't really growing the pie necessarily. That's just like better monetization of said pie. So, do you think comics at all could widen again? Is that possible? And if not, why do you think it is? It's just people have been, like you were saying, just so untrained out of it. We just can't go back.
We are finding out that the pre-orders are absolutely gigantic for this title. space to show off, but
I've seen
before we
people
get
do
into
that.
the topic, if you enjoy the content I create, check out the links in the description, follow me on social media, and consider supporting through Patreon or via YouTube memberships. Now, I wanted this game to succeed from the get-go.
And what I mean by that is talking to retailers over
There were a lot of people, Puritans and activists, who were upset over this title's release simply because, of course, one of the
you're
things
gonna
that
die
I
and you
like
can't help
is
anybody else out.
anonymity. And
So it's gonna be one of those things where you have to make
look to be very pretty, but at the end of the day, those people are going to seemingly lose their
action figure. There's all the other.
because the official Stellar Blade Twitter account had posted Stellar Blade's pre-orders have reached number 2 on the PlayStation Store US. Thank you so much. And as you can see, it was even beating out more upcoming games that are closer to release, like Skull and
Wrapping paper. There's an action figure. There's all the other. I love on the spreadsheet.
100%.
You know, there's the comment.
What the fuck just happened here?
100%.
You know, there's the comment.
Just a little bit of outrage, but this is also when pre-orders had opened up because they only just opened up.
There's an action figure. There's all the other.
Of course, I am purchasing it. I am buying the digital deluxe edition. I want everything this game has to offer, even the exclusive cosmetics. But yes, as you can see, the pre-orders are apparently fantastic. The only thing that was beating it out was the show 24, and that is
but
the digital deluxe edition. But being beat out by one single game really isn't that big of a deal because again, there, you know, it was
reason that they did is because it went onto a shelf.
time, you know, Skull and Bones, the base and premium editions, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, the base.
We can make more pie. You don't have to just. This is the one slice I have.
Fantastic for the PlayStation Store in the US, but it also
That's what's going to be okay for me. And I think we see a lot of people doing that, which is great. And I think that's the way to continue doing it.
as you can see, this you know, icon error post also you know, highlights the Stellar Blade official account's post about how it reached number 2 on the PlayStation Store US.
Wow, look at that. That brought me up to fucking 52 minutes of an hour and 34. Look at that. He talks for... Holy shit. He talks for like 10 minutes straight. 39. Alright, let's round up to 40 to 52. He talks for 12 minutes straight. And this is all that Pete gets in the meantime.
There's the show. There's the games.
I might...
There's the show. There's the games. There's the...
And this is all the word...
wrapping paper. There's the action figure. There's all the other... I love on this.
What the fuck is that noise? That's a anomaly.
I love.
Yep, that's gotta go.
Until release, because many people are extremely excited for this. I mean, this was one of the most recent trailers that released the new gameplay overview. And look at this,
On the
it's
spreadsheet.
sitting at
You know, there's
3,000 likes,
Alright.
only 907 dislikes. This is being
Holy shit.
positively
12 minutes. This is the longest. This has never happened before. In all of my editing of this show, I've never had a guest go on 12 minutes talking.
over this game. Also, some Puritans were just trying to get this title canceled, which of course is terrible in my opinion. These developers have clearly put a lot of love and a lot of work and effort into this game, and every time they speak about it, they're so excited for the future and, you know, what they want to do with Stellar Blade.
I might have to edit some of this down. He might repeat himself. We'll
And I mean,
see.
I like all these things. Think comics at all could widen again? Is that possible? And if not, why do you think it is? It's just people have been, like you were saying, just so untrained out of it. We just can't go back.
Well, you know, I want to definitely say that what they're doing and what so many others are doing as well is incredible. It's unbelievably impressive. I think there's an entrepreneurial system behind that if we look at it and compare it with the 70 to 80 or so years of other companies that have come before them and have established characters and brands, I think it's kind of unfair to do it. Not saying that you were doing that, but I've seen people do that. And I think what they're doing, what we're doing, what so many others are doing, lots of creators out there are doing this, is they're recognizing that the system is broken beyond repair, and it is. The system is absolutely and utterly broken. It'll work for certain people, and for most, it won't work at all.
Standard, but also exciting nonetheless. And I just think that this is going to be a game that many people are going to end up appreciating. And on the official Stellar Blade tweet, you have tons of people praising them for this game. Killer Dolls had said, I'm doing my part. I don't even own a PS5 and I'm buying it to support it. It is unfortunate that it is a PlayStation 5 exclusive. That is the one major downside to this release that I think is going to affect its sales overall, because I do think that obviously if it was on other platforms, it would have more of a reach and there would be more people purchasing it, but at the end of the day, you know, it is what it is. I'm still going to be purchasing it on PlayStation 5 because it is not censored. I know we were all extremely worried that
And
because it was a PlayStation
to get any kind of success, you have to realize you have to step outside of that system. You have to create a separate system, and that takes time, and it eventually, hopefully, maybe it catches on. I think there's a way to look at it where it's not necessarily about you have to purposefully go out there and grow the system, but you have to stand within it long enough to survive the new system you're creating. It's a war of attrition. So if you can kind of wait it out, in essence, while having success, and grow by doing the things that you know need to be done, then depending on how many of those things you're doing and how frequently and how consistently, you'll notice your growth is either skyrocketing, stagnating, or declining. But I think that overall, we're seeing a lot of people that are getting tired of certain things within the corporate side of it and are going more and more towards the independent, going more towards crowdfunded. People that would suggest, well, it needs to be in a brick and mortar store because the brick and mortar store is where it's got to be. Amazon's one of the biggest, if not the biggest retailer on the planet, and that's online primarily. Then you're talking about there's a lot of things within the brick and mortar stores. Sometimes it feels like the most difficult place on earth to sell a comic book is at a comic book shop. And what I mean by that is talking to retailers over the years, it's incredibly difficult sometimes, even if you have a very quality book. I mean, we've had books that were on the New York Times bestsellers list. We've had books that were getting national press coverage. We had books that were being turned into film. And it was still incredibly difficult to convince a retailer, look, just put one copy on the shelf. You know, even local stores to be like, let's help each other promote. You know, you're local, I'm local. Let's get together and let's promote each other. And even then, sometimes it'd be very difficult to get something going. The glances and the conversations sometimes with retailers, you'd think that you were trying to sell them something else completely different outside of their scope of product, with the way that tone could kind of be. So I think that the rise of crowdfunding, all of a sudden you get the fact that customers, for the longest time, many of them don't have comic shops near them anymore. Many of them love comics, but it's difficult to find any that they would like. And then on top of it, the comic industry isn't really that great when it comes to having online availability. I think the best comic shop on the planet for online is probably eBay. Other than that, you can get Midtown, you can get TFAW, you can get a couple of these other ones, but it's not as comprehensive as it could be or maybe should be. So combined with all of that, creates the perfect storm for the independent creator to come in, take advantage of what's going on with crowdfunding, and then eventually even, or at the same time, like what we're doing at Alterna, have their own store, their own site, and then you can build up merch, you can build up a back issue catalog, all these other kinds of things. So I think right now we're seeing the start of something that is really difficult to pinpoint exactly how it's going to go and maybe how far it'll go. But in terms of the growth of readers and things like that, I think that there's tremendous potential for it. I think it's all there. It just depends on the avenues in which we choose to explore. And I think there's some people there that are doing a fantastic job. And first and foremost, people that are making comics have to understand you got to worry about how you're going to succeed. Not about how the industry succeeds, not about how someone else succeeds, not about how to grow the readership of comics or whatever it is. If you don't worry about putting the oxygen mask on first, you're going to die and you can't help anybody else out. So it's going to be one of those things where you have to make sure that you're doing as good as you could possibly do. And by doing that, other people will hopefully become inspired by that, either to learn from what you're doing, maybe learn what you're doing and maybe not do certain things, or maybe get a fire under their butt about it and get really competitive about it. And maybe they think, hey, I see what they're doing. I could do better than that. And then they go and try too. I think it's a win-win-win all the way around. But people have to really be concerned about growing their own businesses as best as they possibly can, as opposed to like saving an industry or growing an industry or whatever it may be. If the publishers out there that are in the established mainstream industry side of things, if they have, and they do, have tremendous leverage and opportunities in front of them that they constantly choose to not take, that is kind of a situation, I think, where the burden of growing the base falls on them. And I think that a lot of them, unfortunately, over the years, and we're seeing it a lot now, a lot of the publishers, they view it as like the comics are secondary to everything else. And it's not even like, okay, there's the movies and then there's the comics. It's like, well, there's the movies, there's the show, there's the games, there's the wrapping paper, there's the action figure, there's all the other... on the spreadsheet. There's the comic. And instead it should be the other way around. It should be, here's the comics, first and foremost, the best thing ever, because that's where everything comes from, and then everything else spawns from that. It's a nice kind of like beautiful rain cloud, and then everything else from the comics rain cloud is falling down and creating all these wonderful plants and life underneath it. But instead it's viewed as like, oh yeah, the comics, yeah, those things that like I guess no one wants anymore. And because they treat it that way, because that's the attitude, it's kind of like a self-fulfilling prophecy. And I think we're seeing the same kind of spreading too thin with the ancillary media at this point too. So we're seeing like the movies and the shows are starting to feel like homework. It's starting to get really spread. It's starting to kind of reboot constantly. It's starting to, and then they're facing the mortality of the actors themselves. I'm sure that they'll eventually work in AI to a point where they don't need to worry about that factor anymore, which breeds a whole other host of problems. But we're seeing so many different things, all these different mistakes that they've made. Instead of all the strengths of comics, we're seeing all of the weaknesses being amplified across the board lately. And I think that's so unfortunate, because there was a time where you can really say, look at everything that's going. We had like in the 90s especially. 80s were really strong too, and the 70s had their own strength as well. But the 90s had a tremendously strong comic market at that point. Really strong ancillary media with figures and cards and merch, and then very strong television shows in terms of like Batman the Animated Series. You had the DC and Marvel universes, X-Men, Spider-Man, all of that. And it was giving birth to a lot of really strong independent source material as well. I mean, we can't overlook Ninja Turtles and what Ninja Turtles was doing in the 80s into the 90s. So you had all these different things. But now it feels like the companies are very big and very insecure. They're not comic companies anymore. They haven't been comic companies solely for a long time, in terms of the big two at least. And so now they're looking at like, well, what do we do to make sure that we don't have any competitors where it's going to start hitting us where it counts? And well, we can't have them growing at the comic store. So we need to make sure we kind of sort of strong arm what the retailer is ordering by forcing a whole lot of crap down their throat. So they have to make the decision of, well, do I order from here or do I order from there? And if I don't order from the independent, that means I got to order and put on the shelf something that I know of, because at least people will go, okay, well, I know that character, I know that company. And that's the thought process with so many of them when I've talked to them over the years, where I'm like, but you just told me that you think that book looks like crap and you don't think it's going to sell. And they're like, yeah, yours looks great, but at the same time, people know what that company is, or they've heard of that character, or they don't really know your company and your character. I was like, are you aware that at one point in time, no one knew what the hell that was either? And the reason that they did is because it went onto a shelf. But at that point in time, it was a different system. There wasn't a direct market system. It was a newsstand system, and they pretty much just got what they got.
Is the stream completely fucking up for everyone?
So now
my Twitch
what's happening at the direct market with retailers.
My
is
Twitch
putting
is
them
all
in a
screwed
bad
up
place,
right now.
and it's forcing their hand in terms of what they are going to support on the shelf.
It's
and
like
then
a
I'm
fucking
talking to
huge
retailers
delay
where
now.
they
I'm
go,
not
well,
hitting
we want
that.
something that will kind of more or less sell itself. I said, well, you got to be careful what you wish for with that, because the more you stock product that's just going to sell itself. Now, I understand product that's going to sell, where you can recommend it, it looks good, and it appeals to your customers. But if it's going to sell itself, what's going to happen is that eventually that vendor is going to realize it sells itself, and they're going to stop giving away the 62 to 65% to retail and distribution. They're going to set up their own distribution. They're going to set up their own retail. And then you're out of the equation because they don't need the middleman anymore because the product sells itself. So it's a really odd case right now where I think retailers would really benefit from store organization of genre, maybe supporting local, as long as the local supports them as well. And then also, and having sections for that. And then also,
Oh, fuck.
Whenever I work in the yard, I will listen to usually Perch or Wes or Clownfish. In recent Perch
and of course, after fulfillment, and say, hey, could you cut me a deal? You know, maybe half off or whatever, and I can get your books into my store. Is that a little more work? Yes, but it's a business. And this is what you have to do to maintain and to grow that business. And then that's how I think everyone will start succeeding, if everyone starts kind of leveraging their strengths. But right now it feels like everyone is really concerned with their piece of pie and like nibbling on it as little as they can, instead of going, guys, we can make another pie. We can make more pie. You don't have to just, this is the one slice I have. I got to nibble on it for forever. You know, and instead of thinking, oh, well, we could all make another pie together. Unfortunately, it's a very kind of, this is my little thing, and that's the way it's going to be. And that mindset is a frightening one in terms of the larger scope of the retail, direct market, corporate, mainstream. So I think a lot of indie creators out there see that or have dealt with it firsthand. And they're
Twitch has been
viewing
doing
it
this
as, well,
shit
you
a
know,
lot
I'm going to
lately.
make my own thing over here. You guys keep doing whatever it is you're doing.
Fucking sucks.
And I'm going to do what I can do best here with my own little, you know, my own little thing. No matter what you want to call it, it's fine. But that's what's going to be okay for me. And I think we see a lot of people doing that, which is great. And I think that's the way to continue doing it.
It is monstrous how the big two, especially, as they have watched over the last decade, the comic book retailers, as they've been basically drowning, they've just thrown more.
Okay. I think that's as much as I'm gonna get done right now. I might come back to this later tonight. Otherwise, get crack on it tomorrow. I need to look into this 12-minute section here. This may need to be cut down a little. Even though I didn't hear him really repeating himself, this might be able to be simplified. But yeah, I'll be back in a little while to play some Arkham City. And probably not going to try with the Grand Theft Auto 4. I haven't returned it, but my computer really doesn't want to broadcast it, so I don't know.